Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Narrow Way Podcast, where I'm your host, Corey, and we are practicing walking in the ways of the kingdom and living life through kingdom lens. Okay, so today we have a topic that is near and dear to my heart and also prevalent and relevant in the Christian faith. Today we're going to be talking about missionaries and the impact that they have on indigenous communities all around the world. I know indigenous may sound like Native American. Yes, we're talking about them and other communities all around the world that Christian missionaries have impacted. Um, we're talking about this from the lens of how they have negatively impacted them. That this is a complex world problem. Um, it's complex because there are many different factors, as well as many different people affected by the missionary enterprise and its impact on indigenous communities. You have, on the one hand, the missionaries and the missions organizations, and on the other hand, you have the communities that are largely affected by the misconduct, maltreatment, and negligence of Christian missionaries and missions organizations and how they have dealt with their communities. So that's the issue that we'll be talking about today. This issue is not a linear issue. It comes from various points, and so I'm going to try my best to address those things and also to propose a solution, because the problem is that in many ways Christian missionaries and missions organizations have departed from the way of Scripture as it describes and even depicts how we interact with other communities that are not Christian. And some of the biggest problems in these efforts is that they are imposing Western ideas of Christianity instead of biblical norms and imperatives of what it means to be Christian. We have to get away from this idea that Christianity is a Western thing and that all communities should look the way that the Western church does and should do church and do Christianity and live in the context of the gospel through a Western lens. So my proposed solution to this is, it may seem simple and it's not simple, but it is simple in terms of the groups that requires its attention. So my proposed solution is that we address this issue from a macro level and a micro level. Here are the definitions of the macro level and the micro level. The macro level is society at large. It is the whole of society, the way that these communities are viewed from a societal stance and the way they are handled from a societal stance. The micro level, which is probably one of the most important positions to address here, is the missions organizations, parachurch organizations, missionaries, Christian education around missions, all things concerning this, and even the church, and pastors and leaders that put on missionary efforts and who support missionary efforts. It is directed towards them, this micro level needed to be enterprised really and brought back to mission, funny enough. So this is what we will be talking about today. So let's jump right in to the micro level. And I've told you who the micro level is, and my solution for them is that one, we educate. It's so important to educate new missionaries, existing missionaries, and those in the missionary enterprise. Educate about the harm that has been done, not from a Western point of view, but from the indigenous point of view. There's been a lot of rupture in trust, communication, and regard in these communities. And something that's super necessary is for there to be an unlearning and a relearning of what Scripture describes as imperative and what it does not. We have to allow the gospel to flourish in the context of these cultures. And it's very possible and we know that it's possible because we see it in Scripture. We see that Paul says that he became all things to all people to win them. Not that he transformed himself and he sold out his faith and that we should be just super tolerant of things that are heretical. That's not what this is about. This is about coming to a community, not to control it, but to give them the gospel and allow the gospel to take form in their context and to see the beauty of God's design and his desire expressed through a different kind of community. So that is part of the solution, is this mass relearning. We have to take a mass exodus from our framework of belief and of understanding of what missions is, and to just truly go back to Scripture and relearn what it really means to be missionaries and to be on mission. Another thing that we have to do is to assess these communities, assess how well are we actually implementing the things of Scripture in these communities. Are we loving them? Are we actually loving our neighbor? Are we taking the time to build relationships? In order for there to be a reconciliation in these communities, there has to be a coming to the table. There has to be collaboration. It's so important for collaboration to happen in these communities because many of them do not trust Western missionaries and the efforts of missions. They don't trust them. They have a very reasonable distrust. And so it's going to be necessary for these relationships to be mended. But first, you have to come to the table with open hands. They have to know that they can be seen and that they can be heard, and that you're not trying to uproot all the richness of their culture, because there are some things that are fine and there are some things that are not. But we have to stick to Scripture. So on this micro level, we're coming to the table with collaboration. We're coming with humility. We're coming to actually hear the needs, to hear the heart and desires of the people, to build relationships, to let people know that they're more than just an initiative, that they do mean something, that they're actually what the truth of the gospel is, that we are joining a family. And so to show them that they are family and that the way that they are family is worthy, that God put them in this context. And so that context deserves some dignity. And this is on the micro level. There is a larger narrative that needs to be corrected on the macro level. The macro level needs a lot of recalibration, and honestly, the micro level is highly responsible in lots of ways for the depictions and the narrative of these communities. And we have to address some of the falsehoods, which are that these communities are underdeveloped, or that they are primitive, or that they lack this or that. And the truth is, they live in a different context. And some of the contexts that they live in do not require some of the things that we think are necessary. And people live differently because of their culture. And there is something to be admired and learned even from that. So, on a macro level, after the micro level has done its due diligence, it has this opportunity and responsibility to rectify misconceptions. Historically, we know that in the name of Christ, a lot has been done that has nothing to do with Christ. And the harm that's been done to these communities, some of it has been done in the name of Christ, and it has nothing to do with the gospel. It has everything to do with traditionalism and control and dominance, and even political things. So we really have to, as a society, address the truth and be informed of the truth and receive the truth. And this is not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes time. It's something that's going to require effort and intentionality and persistence. We can't sit back and just think it's going to happen. We've got to get in front of it. We've got to get behind it and be humble and accept that there has been harm done. There has been some infractions that need to be repaired, as well as some things that need to be thrown out. There are some things that we're requiring of these communities that God is not. And if that's the case, we need to reassess in those areas. So on this micro level and macro level, these changes need to happen. And this is the solution that I propose in its simplest form, is that we go back to the way of Christ, that we go back to the way of Scripture, that we do not take away the freedom of form that God has given his church, his local churches in various contexts, and that we realize that the bride of Christ is beautiful because she is diverse, because she's not diverse just for the sake of diversity, but she's diverse because that's how God made her. And so we need to honor the context that our brothers and sisters are coming from, and honor the culture that they exist in. We have to be competent in the way that we understand them, not from our point of view, but from the point of view that they are also image bearers. I think it's so important for us to remember that whatever community we're going to with missionary efforts, the people there are image bearers, and they are worthy of dignity. They are worthy of being seen as valuable. So this is my proposed solution. It is not all inclusive of everything that may be needed, and it is going to take time. It is going to take effort. It is going to take intentionality. But most of all, it's going to take the gospel. It's going to take us taking the gospel serious again, and realizing and recalibrating our motives, checking our intentions, checking our initiatives, and measuring everything by the gospel, measuring everything by doing things in the narrow way. All right, guys, that's all I have for you this week. Hope you enjoy, and I hope you're moved to move in the narrow way.